There's a particular kind of woman who makes everything work. One who is usually three steps ahead of everybody else, who holds the room together, and who knows exactly what needs to happen and quietly makes sure that it does. A lot of organizations rise and fall on whether they have these women in place, and the smartest leaders in the country know it. Today's guest, Ursula Cola, is that woman, and she has spent 30 years proving it. Through her businesses, Capital EA and Bear Consulting, she has trained, supported, and recruited the executive assistants and operators that keep some of Australia's most recognised and high profile individuals functioning at their best. She's unbelievable. She really is. She has worked alongside high ranking politicians, board members, and government department heads through some of the most intense periods of political pressure this country has seen. She consults to traditional owners in remote North Queensland, doing the kind of on country work that most people in her world wouldn't even know how to find their way into. And this year, Ursula was personally invited by the President of the Senate to speak at Australian Parliament House for International Women's Day on justice, equity, and the women still being left behind. She is also, for the record, a woman who has rebuilt her entire life on her own terms after losing everything she thought she knew. Ursula is adorable. I love her. She lives with a cocktail in her hand. She has a passion for fashion and she has a refusal to play small. And she once nearly cancelled a major speaking event because she was on her knees in front of a toilet bowl due to nerves. And today she shares with us the mantra that she used to get through that and through many challenging moments since. Let's get to the podcast. Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. Hello, Ursula, and welcome to Big Stuff.
Thank you. Good morning.
You referenced a social media post that I posted yesterday about being in the messy middle, that part where you are in a transformation phase.
Mm,
You've been in a number of transformation phases over the years, haven't you?
yeah, it has, yeah. I like to think it's kind of like a 7-year cycle for me. And I go, 7 years, I'm going through it again.
Yeah, well, we do. We have, according to Spiral Dynamics, we have about 7 of these major transformations in a lifetime, like major transitions in a lifetime, and they're deeply uncomfortable. And you said you were just really lovely. You were actually one of the loveliest people around because I saw you only a week after I lost my mum, and you wrote me a beautiful poem and you gave me a beautiful candle. And it was so beautiful and touching. But what you just said then when we jumped on about being in the messy middle, like say that again about the mourning periods.
Yeah, so in, the only thing I can think of is it's maybe European culture, but in our culture, when we lost a loved one, particularly a parent, the message was to go easy and, to take caution in approaching us. So after I lost my mum as well, I remembered, my brothers had done it, but also I remember thinking when someone approached me within that, and it was really, really 12 months and then a little bit longer, I remember I still had a bunch of emotions pop up. And I thought to myself, I really need to have something identifying so people just go easy with me while I navigate this next chapter. Yeah. I definitely felt it.
Yeah, and it is wild because it is like a traumatic brain injury. So even though day to day I don't necessarily feel like I am, in inverted commas, sad about mum. It's not like I'm thinking about loss or thinking about grief day to day. But what I do find day to day is an exhaustion and I have now like some bursts of energy and bursts of creativity and then I need rest, or I don't feel like being as social or as public as I once was. And it's just like a really different time energetically. And I think unless somebody's been through it, it's really, really difficult to describe.
Mm. Yeah, it is,
How
isn't it?
did you find, yeah, it really is. With your mum, I know that you were very close. With the loss of your mum, how did you find your way sort of through that time and then out the other side? Because life doesn't just stop. You need to keep moving forward and keep showing up and keep working or keep parenting or keep whatever. Like, how did you find your way through that time?
I started to really, and I think you've done a bit of this too, Danielle, from the outset. You probably may be conscious of it. But one of the things that automatically or organically started for me was capturing her sayings and her values. And all of a sudden, I really wanted to bottle those up and never forget them. They became like really precious to me. And I remember thinking, oh, why am I thinking about, mum's value or standard on this, after she'd gone? Because I wouldn't have thought about it so much when she was here. But as soon as that opened or that can of worms open, I was like, oh man, I just want to bottle. I don't want to ever lose that. I don't want to, that was her essence. It was the way she operated. There were so many things that I then attached myself to keep that closeness and that her alive in me, so to speak. And that was a very important concept to digest and take grasp of, because then I always felt like, man, she's not gone. She's in me now because I've picked up her standards, her values, her way of living, her voice in so many ways. And even if I talk about her with people that knew her, I'd even put on her accent because she was Russian. So, and they'd be like, oh, actually, you're talking. And I go, yeah, start talking like her as well. And yeah, it's just capturing her spirit, her essence, and carrying it with me now. And I think that's the way I coped. Yeah, the way I coped.
And when she was alive, did you almost rebel against those things in her? Like, I'm sure that as a teen or as a younger woman, you probably did. But did
Yeah,
that
yeah.
surprise you then to
Oh,
want to continue
absolutely.
the legacy? What is that about?
Absolutely. There's things that I'd roll my eyes. Oh God, it's this again. Or, there was particular things about wearing skirts below your knees. She still was quite strict in terms of nutritional meals, and food was a big component of her life. So, her cooking. Oh, I embody that so much more now after she's gone than when she was around. You start flipping things and you realize the extent of their essence after they're gone more so than when they're there. I did recognize it because she was such a character and full of life, and nothing ever was ever too big or serious. And there's things that I value in that today of just looking at life and going, you know what, you move on, or you find a solution, you find a way to make something work. And that
Mm.
is just so good, such great values.
Absolutely. And it is something that I really, really see in you and something that I really admire in you, because I have known you now for a couple of years on the speaking circuit. We have shared stages. We have supported each other, at the Women in Leadership events. You've been to my retreat. So I know you both professionally and personally now.
Mm,
And I see in you such incredible ambition and professionalism and success, but also this deep, deep groundedness. You don't take anything too seriously, and you would never know just by talking to you what a heavy hitting badass you are. And it's true though. It's
mm,
true.
mm,
And like you've described yourself as challenge driven,
mm,
someone who thrives when things are difficult and
mm,
complex.
mm.
Um, do you think that came from your mum? Where do you think it came from?
That is actually a full ancestry line from my great grandparents, her mother, so my grandmother herself. Yeah, I've thought about this extensively, more recently working with Indigenous people, just to understand your DNA and your ancestral lines, because there is definite evidence there that we carry that bloodline. And there's things that come through, including the negative stuff, the trauma, obviously, comes through as well in terms of what they'd gone through. Thankfully, a lot of what I suppose, from great grandparents and grandparents, and then my mother, it kind of filtered through, because times were getting a little bit better in that generation in terms of being outside of war. Although my mother was in World War II, but the filtration process had begun, and ultimately, I mean, she raised 6 children with, I guess we'd be spoiled in the scheme of things of how she was raised and how her parents were raised. But that courage, the tenacity to get up and come to another country, being migrants in a different place, to never ever they weren't ever employed. My father started his own business, the entrepreneurship that comes through. I wouldn't be that today. And my siblings are all business owners, like we learned how to stand on our own 2 feet through that bloodline. And there was nothing taught, like there was no lessons. It was just observations. And that's why I guess I understand the Indigenous space so well, because that space of living through trauma and how it seeps through the generations, it's there, and it's real, and it's to me, it's a no-brainer in terms of understanding what Indigenous people are living with today. And I always go, well, I'm 3 generations along where that has been filtered through. And so it will happen where that does get filtered through for our First Nations people, but it's still going to take some time. And I understand that implicitly, where there's a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you are doing work now with First Nations people. You're doing incredible stuff. We'll get to that shortly. And this has come off the back of 30 years of working with people at the top of their game. So working with politicians, executives under real pressure, working with boards. What does it take to be the person that the people at the top trust and call into their inner circle in times of need?
The first thing I always think of, which I'm starting to laugh, is a good sense of humour. And that's probably not the right answer for people that are in leadership roles to look at and go, what? It's obviously earning someone's trust. So the biggest thing is getting the trust across. So the trust comes from being able to be responsible and capable. So, showing that you're going to see something through to the end. But there is a big component that I think made me successful with those heavy hitters. And that was to always show that I've got their back and I'll carry it. But I did it lightly. I didn't do it tense and stressful and running around like a headless chook. They often were running around like a headless chook, I was like, we've got this, it'll be all right. Not too calm, because if you're too calm, they'll panic and go, well, hold on a minute, she's still not stressed enough. But I would do it in a way that shows a lift of the heaviness. And I think the most thing that a lot of, the execs I've worked with and the bureaucrats over 30 years I've worked, I've always said, you were a breath of fresh air. You were able to form relationships really quickly, which made their life easier. A lot of executive and CEOs, and they are people, but they're also quite analytical and a bit, SpongeBob SquarePants, where they couldn't quite gel with people, and I used to think, oh God, they're so awkward, and so I'd, be that conduit, between them and soften the meetings or soften the environment so that people relaxed a little bit. And that often came with, I remember meeting with some we're talking presidents of countries where I was serving tea and doing various things. And, I stepped on a president's toe at one stage, getting around the coffee table. And there was just, I was like, oh my goodness, fancy that, stepping on your toe. Like, I thought I'm going to call it rather than ignore it. And he started laughing. And then, my exec was sort of looking like, oh God, Ashley, you've made a fool of yourself. But I was like, no. And we had a moment where we just broke that, that seriousness. And when I look at things on TV now, or when I see people in serious, very heavy hitting things, everyone's human at the end of the day. and even things that are broadcasted live. Everybody is human, and people appreciate the human condition. And I think that's what forms relationships quicker, is that, and being successful is understanding the human condition and being yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so often we feel ashamed by our own human conditions. So
Yes.
I feel ashamed that I stood on a president's toe when it was an accident, or I feel ashamed that we all get sick, and we've all started or whatever, right? Or we've,
Yes. Yes,
we've
exactly.
all had these things that like our body lets us down, or our humanness lets us down. Again, inverted commas, and we are shamed by the human condition. How do you learn to embrace this humanness, your own humanness?
How do I embrace it? It's self belief. It's self belief. I just believe that if there's something I can't do, I call it. If I've made a mistake, I call it. If I can, if there's something I am doing, I'll do it. So there's an element of, and I know that's probably easier said than done, because when I speak to people, they're like, "Well, look, Ash, I'm just not that way inclined, or I have to have that building front," and I think definitely there's something between 40 and 50, and then 50 to 60 that changes. Like I have to say, before 40, I probably had more of the building front and the different kind of structure, the way I operated.
Mm,
But after meeting thousands of people, and meeting high profile individuals such as, presidents and other dignitaries around the world, I can, oh, sorry, chili just fell off the lounge. There is a sense of recognizing that you don't have to know everything.
mm,
That was a big thing for me. I was like, if I didn't know, I'd feel embarrassed. Or if I didn't have the solution right away, I'd feel I failed. Whereas, it's when you meet so many people, and people that are important and smart, and you recognize that they don't know everything. And like you say, they still get sick and, have to go off and do the things that that every
yeah.
human has to do to exist and get
Mm,
better. Um, and it's like, just be human, and know your worth, know where you're at, but be honest with it. I think the thing that most people struggle with is putting up that front, trying to be someone they're not, failing, and then
mm,
blaming others for that failure. And I always say in my programs as well, you are the number one root cause of every issue that is surrounding you, because you either A, left yourself in that position, or B, have demonstrated a personality or a character that isn't you naturally.
mm,
So, hence the reason that then success comes from the authenticity, what you're able to achieve, what you're not able to achieve, and being your true self. Does it take to 50, 51 to say that? Probably,
yeah.
yeah.
You said a moment ago that it's self-belief. And one thing I know from the stories that I've heard you tell from the stage in these leadership events that we have been at together, I've seen you do it at your own events that I've been at. You've talked about the amount of times that you've put your hand up for something that
Mm.
you haven't necessarily known if you can do. But if somebody has sort of walked into the workplace and said, "Hey, we need someone to step up, to act in, to take over this role," you have always been the first person to put your hand up. Do you think that you always had the self-belief, or the amount of times that you've put yourself into the positions where you haven't known if you can do it, but you've given it a crack, and the amount of times that you have worked it out has helped you to create the self-belief, like cart or horse?
Yeah, that's true. And in some circumstances, it is cart first, and then horse later. But again, I'd be honest in saying that to whoever, I put myself in front of, if it was where they needed someone to come in and try something. And I do recall it being quite early days. There was no one that wanted to go to, to work with a secretary of department back in the day. Gosh, it must have been like 1997. I don't know, long time ago. Anyway, I remember thinking, oh, that's odd, they won't go. And I thought, I'm actually genuinely excited to give it a go. I didn't know if I was going to fail at it, but I just said to the gentleman, look, I'm giving this a go. No one else came up, and he was like, absolutely. I'm just so pleased that someone's here to be out the front, and we'll work together over this period. We'll just get it. He wasn't. I think the expectation thing is a big one. So that he was not expecting a replacement. He was expecting someone that is going to put their hand up and give something a go. And ultimately, isn't life about that as well? Like, if you're going to give it a go. And again, if you fail, you fail. At least you're not going to look back and say, oh, I wouldn't know if I was unable to do that because I didn't try. It was, I did try and I failed, and I'm going to try and do X, Y, and Z to see if I can do it again. Or, oh, I tried, it wasn't near as scary as what it possibly is. And the more people you talk about experiences, they all go, yeah, definitely not as scary as I thought it was. Everyone says that. Everyone, even starting new jobs. Oh, it was tough in the first, few months, but then now I feel like I've been there for 3 years. Everyone says the same thing. I've never met anyone that said, I haven't met anyone. I don't know if you have, Danielle, but I've never met anyone that's sort of come out of an experience that has said that wasn't worth it or that it was a failure. Everyone generally gets around it somehow.
Yeah, agree. A lot of people, and I've been having this conversation a number of times lately about this space of trying new things and putting yourself out there and having a crack. A lot of people really live in the fear state and the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of looking incompetent, the fear of letting people down. Someone said to me the other day, which was interesting, it's a good friend of mine who's going through a big transition also, and she said to me something like, well, it's easy for you because you don't get scared about doing new things. And I was like, are you mad? Like, I totally get scared. I was scared starting this podcast. I'm scared having an art exhibition. I was scared when I first started speaking. I'm scared writing a fiction. Like, all of these things are scary, but I'm not going to let that stop me.
Yeah.
How do you get past that space of fear into possibility?
Look, this started for me with a saying that I repeat like a mantra, and it is, everything on the other side of fear is growth. So there was a time back in, I want to say about 2010, I had a very big I'd already been doing some public speaking, but this was a major one with an auditorium, 600 people looking at me like from a cinema type complex, where everyone's like upwards. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be really daunting. And the subject matter was conflict resolution. So quite a heavy subject. But at the time, I think the Australian Public Service had been struggling with a number of complaints about people having issues with other people. And they said, oh, maybe I can share something on conflict. Anyway, I, on the night before, got myself into a tether about this event, and so it started early. I didn't have any clue of how the event would go, whether I knew the numbers were large, but my exec and I used to have also a saying that was piss poor planning equals piss poor performance, right? Which I think we're all familiar with. So I also have that in my mind. If I plan well, that's going to eliminate some of my fear. And mind you, I will say to those that are similar to me, some of that planning can be 24 hours before, because some of the best material comes out of me literally at the last minute. And there has been times I've overplanned and then ended up with something I've gone, I've overthought this and now it's a bit jumbled. And then the times where I've done something very, very prior to something big and gone, that's brilliant. Like, because I was working from the highest point of my adrenaline or cortisol level. So
Yeah.
the good juices came out. So the planning part, but then equally, I'd gone into this state and I had developed such a pit of anxiety in my gut that I had to have a vomit. And I thought, I've just got to get this out because I feel so sick. Like even brushing my teeth, I was gagging and I thought, oh, this is brilliant. Just stick it down further and have a vomit, you know. So I did. And my former husband approached me in the bathroom and he said, look, I think you've got to can this. You're going to embarrass yourself. So there wasn't even myself self-sabotaging. There was him on top of this going, you're going to embarrass yourself. Why would you do this? You're obviously in a state. Ring them and tell them you're sick. Do you want me to ring them and tell them you're sick? And I remember coming up from the toilet seat. I was literally my knees on the toilet mat, me head in the toilet, and I looked up at him. And it was even that made me realize there is no way I would cancel this. I would rather die than cancel this. And I looked at him and I said, do you know what? Everything on the other side of fear is growth. So I'll catch you later. And I walked out. And ever since then, I thought, I'm going to repeat that mantra. And that event was, yes, scary in terms of looking at, I remember walking in and looking to my left and going, don't look up there again. There's too many faces. The introduction, getting up on the podium, then looking over. There was one girl in the audience who kept like that. Like, and I was like, oh my God, thank God she's there. And I'd known her, but many years ago I knew her. Hadn't spoken to her for years, but she was smiling and waving and giving me the biggest vote of confidence in my mind. Mm.
Now, you mentioned your former husband is how you described it. I've heard you say that the end of your marriage was like the worst thing possible and your whole world needed to be revalued. Can you take us back to that period? Now, I'm going to put a caveat out there. Your ex-husband is a good man. We're all doing the best that we can. We're not here to bag him. Just whatever you're comfortable sharing about, I guess, the dissolution of a partnership and how it made you question pretty much everything you thought you knew.
Absolutely. And I'd met my partner at a very young age, so at 16, and obviously had been with him for 35 years, married for 25.
It's a whole life.
Yeah, it was a whole life, and it's wild, and that's why we can't necessarily, cut each other off entirely because we've had such a big portion of our lives spent together and as predominantly friends, for most of our lives, so that's important. So the marriage had basically started to dissolve longer than I was conscious of it dissolving because I was ultimately in the middle of building a reputable and successful company and still doing very much relationship things in terms of holidays away and spending times and having date nights. But there were also pressures in terms of having a mother that lived with us with dementia, for a number of years. And, looking back on it all, it's all relative. So even the experience of having all of that in the last part of our marriage and then moving into a different space, I'd have to say has been one of, a pivotal, and as much as I saw it in 2019 as the end of my world, I wouldn't have done like probably 20% of what I've done since then. So I think I would have declined offers, or I think I would have kept myself probably particularly, what's the word? Not minimize, but in a rotating process of just
almost
going
contained. Kept yourself contained.
Yeah, because it's ticking boxes and it's doing the things and you're still successful. I never wanted to grow the business massively, so I would have just continued doing what I was doing. But the fact that I've found myself living in different places, being somewhat a nomad, the catalyst was that separation and that divorce. Because what other woman can go do that without, yeah, with being married and having to stay committed? Really, yeah.
Mhm. You mentioned that there was a moment where you questioned whether you continue the business or whether you could continue as you were while you questioned everything, I guess, in that sense of grief and loss and that feeling of being lost in that sort of, I guess, in the first sort of months. How did you decide which direction to go or, I guess, pull yourself up to a place where you could continue?
That's what we call. I didn't recognize it straight away, but that's when you lean into your purpose and your call. Lean in. I wouldn't say lean in. I think I was always working in my purpose or doing my call, but it became very apparent that um, the universe was shifting me, and I was looking at it very differently. Where I was thinking this could actually be aligned more significantly to what my call is, or how I make a difference in the world. So it so that's why that invitation to Queensland and to spend time on Palm Island and do those type of things made it very real for me that aligned more so to making that difference and being helpful in a way that aligns to everything I've achieved over the last 30 years, where it was a pay it forward type obligation, which I didn't see as an obligation. I saw it as an opportunity to trade. You share with me what I need to know, and I'll share with you what I know. And that to me, yeah, it was significant in being very grounded in what my purpose. It signified my belonging, what my call is, how I work more so naturally and organically, as opposed to the type of work I was doing, not Groundhog Day, but the cycle of what I was doing every day. That was, it was fulfilling, but not as much as this type of work.
Yeah, a huge shift. So you were in the corporate space and then you were
Mm.
invited to Palm Island. Tell us about that. What was the invitation and what are you doing up there?
So I actually had a client that was linked to Palm. So his country is Palm Island, Mumba people, and that client actually was ACT Australian of the Year. And we helped him achieve a number of cultural immersion programs and do various things under Capital EA Group. And he had introduced me to his cousin brother, and he'd said, look, he needs a bit of help with governance structure, getting a couple of things going in terms of the cooperation they wanted to put together. So it started with the Teams call, and then I took some team members with me to go visit, because it was like, look, for you to understand this space a bit better, you need to come up. Would you be able to come up? And I went ding, ding, ding. Yes, absolutely. The colleagues I brought with me weren't so happy. You know, she'll still recall how good it was to try something different. So we landed in Townsville and we got the ferry and we jumped off that ferry, and we found the traditional owner, and he went through the next few days of what we were going to achieve. And really, it was a summary of what was needed in order to progress the vision and goals of the elders and the traditional owners of Palm Island. And that to me was significant and very, very interesting. So I was hooked immediately. Yeah, I was hooked. I was like, this sounds fascinating.
Did you have much experience with First Nations peoples or how they operated prior to that?
Uh, I grew up with First Nations families, which I'd never actually considered First Nations. We didn't even talk about it. It's like it was just they were our mates, and that was it. So there was, but I understood their family, and I also attended their family cultural events at times, which I thought to me was normal because we had cultural events in my family, with given my background. And then the clients I had a number of clients in Canberra. Now, to say that they were they're First Nations, of course, but what they were doing in terms of in community, they were more or less not working so much in community in Canberra. What they were doing in Canberra was um, providing reconciliation action plans. So they were doing more of the educational piece to help government agencies and public sector, private sector understand what's required for Indigenous people to um, work with their agencies. So the difference significantly for me was understanding community and being in the middle of community and seeing the raw, the real, and the, I suppose, unresponsible, who's taking responsibility, and that was no one really. It was too bigger issues for anyone to take responsibility. And that's what kind of hooked me, was that the fact that I traveled to Thailand extensively because my father lived there since I was 14, and I saw a lot of brokenness in Thailand, and kind of everyone knew, well, these countries are like this, so you kind of understood that. But to come to somewhere in Australia and see what I would consider similar to what I was seeing in Thailand in the in the 80s,
In what way?
19, um, undeveloped homes, dirt roads, barefoot, everyone walking barefoot, not able to clothe themselves properly, food being incredibly expensive to feed themselves, and no subsidy in terms of having that. The prices, like an avocado was like $10 over on Palm
Mm.
Island. In fact, I bought some crosscuts, an avocado, and a bottle of water, and I think it cost me $35. And I remember thinking, why is it? And they were, oh, that's what we get charged, export costs, because they're an island that's 60 kilometres, well, 140 something kilometres from Townsville, 60 from Lucinda. And you think, well, why are you paying export like this is it's just insane. And then to see the housing, and so obviously there is brick homes there in places that have been built for nurses, teachers, the workers, the general workers. However, for everyone else,
They're
there's a
non-Indigenous though, usually, aren't they? They're coming from the mainland, or are they?
mostly, but there are,
Yeah.
nurses, teachers. There is
Yeah.
some, obviously, there is some Indigenous that family that have ended up in those situations. However, there is, most of those homes are given to the non-Indigenous, yeah. And so then you've got this divide immediately. I was put into, so I did, so once we progressed a little forward, I did actually spend some time there, and I worked well with the council. So they ended up giving me a little place in that old age person's facility, and so I had a little one beddy townhouse uh, on Park Road. And what the weird thing is when I did take my morning walks or go for a run, it was just like paradise. I was like, wow, look at where I am. Yet mainstream and down in the Mission, which they call it the Mission, it's so filled with suppression and darkness. Whereas if you just spread out a bit and you see Palm Island for all it has to offer, it's paradise. It's unbelievable. Stunning, stunning island.
It's
Got
quite the
waterfalls. It's stunning.
amazing. It is quite the dichotomy, right? There's like two really distinct sides of that coin there. As someone who is such a get shit done person, and you are like super proactive and you operate at a really high speed, you think at a high speed, you get stuff done really quickly and efficiently. How did you find working with the traditional elders and the pace at which things were done?
That took a long time. And I guess I still haven't finessed it, to be honest. There's still things that I get like frustrated with, or I think, oh, I could do this now. But then there were very, very real examples of when we did wait through situations where we didn't rush to do something, and the outcome was much better to wait, because if we were reacting to like a government funding application, or um, or reacting to the need to be doing something urgent, we'd find 9 times out of 10 it would fail, because the urgency came from a place of them being, like, not our First Nations people, the government or the agencies we're working with being disorganised, and then needing answers from us as our First Nations group to respond to something in an immediate rush. And so it was more about understanding your own self-worth and your own um, vision and story to then react appropriately to their demands. Because one thing I found was there were a lot of demands, and I was first and foremost put in that front line to deal with a lot of those demands. And I remember thinking, I've never been so busy working with ministers, working with executives. I'm telling you now, doing that role as a business operations manager and um, a governance structural project manager, I've never been busier in all my life until I did that role. I was like, this is unbelievable. And I felt like there was so many people in my face saying, we need this, we need that, we need you, we need the TOs to do this. This is what we want. We need sign off on this. And I was like, I felt like I had to react. And then they were like, stop, stop, stop. This is our position. And I thought, you know what? Yeah. It
So
wasn't
you were
about getting it
busy.
done.
You were busy fielding everyone to make more time for circling,
Yes.
right? To stop the reactivity, to stop people from, which is how, like in this society, everything is reactive. We are all operating like this. The emails come in, we're on it straight away. We're always responsive. We're doing it late at night, whatever. I think there is something so valuable to be learned from that. Is just slow down, take time to respond, allow things to settle.
Yeah.
Did that spill over into other areas of your life? Do you think that you learned?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's knowing your story, knowing yourself, and knowing that you don't have to react to everything around you. And if that demand is there, you can say, I'll get back to you when I feel I've got a proper response. Or if this aligns to my values and standards, well, then we'll make it work. If it doesn't, we can't help you. And it was so, it was so like pivotal. I was like, I had never come from a world like that. We just made everything work to a degree. And yeah, it was really rewarding and refreshing to sort of say, this ain't working for us. And this doesn't sit with our story, our value. That's similar to our values and standards or our vision statement, or with First Nations, it doesn't sit with our elders' story. And sorry, we can't help with that. Unless you want to talk about how you may fit with that story, then we'll have to let this one go. And I came to realize people like, oh, and then it was become an education. Well, if you want to learn, we're happy to educate you on this. So, but that would involve coming to Palm and listening to what the elders have to say. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, you don't have time. Well, sorry. So it was really, and that's very resolute in my life today too. I think, well, you don't have, you can actually push back and have people meet you at your table rather than you jumping on their table at
running to their table. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this year you spoke on International Women's Day at Parliament House.
Yes.
Tell me about that experience. What did you speak to, and how was it?
There was some questions. So it was really quite a surprise to receive a letter from Sue Lyons, President of the Senate. And she had personally written to me saying she would love to see me at Parliament House to talk about some women topics. A big portion of their office is support people as well as other individuals, but She wanted to have a voice from that kind of region in that working and supporting bureaucracy and our politicians was really adamant for her to have a voice. So I spoke about challenges and overcoming various things and some of the tips and tricks that I found to be useful. There were very deliberate in terms of questions about to make a change for women. And the theme is about equity in terms of women's equity. And it's been a bit of a journey for me. And I spoke a little bit about the fact that I'm actually from a traditional culture in that I was raised with a mum that was at home, and I valued her traditional and the traditional upbringing I had of having a mother support me, and then later me be able to support her. So so there was that, and the other thing that I found not conflicting, but understanding where women are an asset to every organisation and place is that it's being able to identify the feminine side of a decision, so the different part of the brain that a male necessarily wouldn't look at, and understanding that um, um, fully. So that was very interesting for me to kind of plan for that day of chatting about various things, but equally how I was going to put it across in terms of understanding that we as women, we've still got a long way to go in terms of feeling that equity is there. And similar to how we've talked about with First Nations people being identified, properly in any situation, it's the same for women as well, and that we do have a place and space in any situation, and it should be honoured and nurtured more so because of the way we think and how different um, our neurological processing is compared to a male. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. How were you nervous, or do you not got nervous anymore?
No, I get nervous. Yeah. That I do. I had to do some deep breathing exercises before that one.
Okay, no vomiting, no.
No vomiting. No vom.
Excellent. How far you've come, my darling. How far you've come.
I know. And thank God that I kept pushing through because, yeah, I would have said no from that day on. I would have never said yes again. So I'm glad. Didn't matter that there was that negative talk. I'm so grateful that I pushed through. I'm so glad that someone just went, keep going.
Yeah, you.
Well, yes, me, but I feel like it could be an ancestor back there. I don't know, pushing me forward.
Yeah, maybe. We started this conversation talking about the messy middle and transitions, and I suppose the constant evolution that is being human. Do you feel that where you are now, the things that you are doing, this is where you are meant to be? Or do you feel that you are still transitioning and there's something more ready to be embraced?
I think the essence of what I do will always remain. So that could be I'd say 60-40 split, if I were to put it in real terms, that I don't think if I were to look back to even when I was 14, that 60% still there as what I was when I was a young girl. Where I like to say I've got a bit of massage room is in that 40% to always continue to grow, to learn, to be open to things. And that's just by way of my character. I'm not someone that does, I like the challenge. I don't do things by halves. I know I have the capacity and a great capacity to make change. And if that is my call and part of my purpose, then I'm going to, by hell or high water, make sure I do it. And because not everyone has that capacity. So I recognize that now. But even to say the word capacity took me about 7 years because I had to understand that after looking after mum for a number of years, that the psychologist I saw after said to me, you have an enormous amount of capacity. because at the time I was looking after a senior high profile individual as well as mum and doing various things. And then obviously the marriage, imploded. But there was certain things that I thought was, isn't everyone like this? And that's when I went, oh, and she said, no, no. So I don't know where that capacity comes from, but I do like to think that you keep with a thread of it always more than 50% so that you stay consistent. So say 60 and then have 40% wriggle room to continue to learn, pick up things, grow your intellectual property, grow your own intellectual property so that that stays with you and continues to expand your capacity and your capability as you move on in life. So that you still have the same message, but you're growing greater and bigger and, helpful.
Let's talk about caring for somebody with dementia for 7 years, because a lot of people don't really talk about the complexity and the challenges of running a business, having a family, managing relationships, all that sort of stuff, and caring for somebody with declining health of any kind. How did you do it? How did you manage?
That was the capacity thing. I actually went into auto, like you end up there's a saying that everyone knows, if you want something done, ask someone busy. And I feel like it was like, right, put that under the belt, keep going, put that under. And I was running at the end of mum's life like I was a pack donkey. Like it probably increased my capacity again, if anything, because everything that, again, you go through that, you end up with more capacity. That's how you build
The
capacity.
capacity grows rather than deplete.
Yeah, it grows. So then you could find yourself like scratching around like, oh, I'm bored, or this isn't something that you're looking for more because you had such great capacity that other people have never dealt with, or they've sent their, elderly people to a home and said, well, and I understand that entirely. And there was parts I look back on now and thought, oh, I should have actually put it into a home. She wasn't good in homes. She was, she'd take a knife to people and things like that because she was always felt like her life was threatened. So I didn't want her to ever be locked up and sent into that sort of space. So yes, it's difficult. Did I cope? Yeah, I survived and I coped, but my capacity grew over that period. And therefore, I think I was looking to something more challenging afterwards.
Do you think, because you keep saying like my capacity grew, it was just my capacity. When I said like, how was it for you emotionally? And you said, well, this is this capacity that I'm talking about. Do you feel like there was an element of you in denial or shoving it down or just getting on with it rather than fully feeling all the emotions of it until after it was done?
Absolutely. And I can only say that that would align to the way I was raised because mum had gone through war and you know what I mean? Like, so I get, that's a big part of who I am today is like,
Just get on with it.
Just get on with it, shove it down. And I can't say that there are definite times where things come up emotionally where I've had to recognize it, feel it, and process it. But it's a mind over matter thing as well, where I think, do I want to feel this? And I don't think it's necessarily a harmful thing in terms of, I'm not harming myself by pushing it down. If it needs to come out, I trust my body to say this has to come out now. And it will. Like I give it permission. I give my body permission to release. And I'm in tune with that. So the parts that that are pushed down, I feel um, they're pushed down for a reason. It's like that is not something I need to critique right now. That is something called survival and keeping my mind in check on the priorities I've got in my life. It doesn't mean that it wasn't important or that my emotions should have been acknowledged. It's more that part is going to take my other part of my brain away from doing the priorities in my life that I need to get on with and that are more healthier than sitting in this moment of processing this emotion. That's my
Mm.
that but that is the way I was raised. Because if my mum could sit down and talk about, sitting in that space and sitting with that emotion, she'd say I'd be here all year because our times were tough. So we acknowledge it, we respect it, we understand that they were tough, but we put it to bed and we move forward on the better times and how to reprogram your brain to activate a positive way forward. Yeah, that's
Incredible. You, you,
that makes sense.
it does. And you put it very articulately because I think there is a very fine line between sitting in the state of processing for a really long time and allowing yourself to become a victim, and then allowing yourself appropriate time and space to process when you have the capacity, right? Because when you're
Yeah,
in it,
yeah,
you need to be in it, right? You got to stay. If it is an autopilot, you just have to do what you have to do. And then creating the time and space to process what needs to come up when it is ready. And when you have the time and space, I will argue that if you don't create the time and space, it does come out like Vesuvius at some point in time, and
yes.
your body keeps the score. But
And
hearing how you've done it and your history and how you were raised is, it's I feel like I know you so much better now.
and it's your program over in Bali or in the
Mm.
Hunter Valley or wherever you end up holding it. So there's one in
Oh yeah, but yeah, in June. Yeah. Looks like it's going to be Bali
that
unless we need to change it. Yeah.
Bali or in Australia is, and those healing retreats, what healing equilibrium
Mhm.
moments in time that a woman in particular can pause. Don't worry, those emotions will come out. We know that, don't we, Danielle? We know that
We
they'll
do.
come out. And if you have to put them aside until, but like you say, make sure you do have that something. And that is such a special thing to do, to go, I'm going to release this now and allow your body to release, allow that time to, yeah, I would never say to tuck it away forever. I say, I give myself permission right now. It's going to be tucked away until I do that, but there will be a time and space that I do it and
Mm.
it will come out, and it will come out because it's sitting there waiting to come out. God forbid. Don't bottle it up for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, you know what? I'm a little bit worried about our economy, and a few very insightful, I'd have to say, intelligent people out of Canberra have given me a heads up that they think, I should batten down the hatches a little bit and not be so, in their words, rogue, but um, nomadish, and don't live by the seat of your pants. Like you need to buckle down a bit now, and you never know what's going to happen. So I've been living this amazing life of just picking up work as I go and going, okay, this has been nice, and obviously working, consulting space, which has been lovely. However, it's never secure, like, so there can be time where the funding runs out and things like that happen. So I'm actually about to look at working with some government agencies on a more, I suppose you could say, secure environmental way. But that would be in the world that I'm passionate about. So that's traditional ownership, the reef and the Great Barrier Reef, which I'm very close to. In fact, only 150 meters that way is the Great Barrier Reef. So I do want to be able to continue that work, and continue working with traditional owners. And I feel that I do have a space there, and I love the fact that they feel that they can work with me, and that's something that I feel is more special than I initially realized when I first went into the space. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that. Um, I will obviously do my leadership public speaking programs and continue to share some insightful information on social media when I've got the time. Tread lightly and gently and live in my truth. That's what I've got next. Yeah.
Amen, sister. That's a perfect note to end on. Tread lightly and gently and live your truth. I love that so much. Thank you for joining us over on Big Stuff. I will put all of your handles and how to get in touch with you in the show notes. I've loved this conversation. I think
Likewise.
you're awesome. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Danielle. Likewise. Much love.
Wow. Ursula said something near the end of our conversation that really resonated with me. And that was to tread lightly and gently and live in your truth. From a woman who has held the weight of other people's worlds for 30 years and who cared for a mother with dementia while running a business for 7 of those years, who had a marriage end and her entire world crack open, and who chose every single time to put her hand up and say yes anyway. That's just incredible to me. She was never hardened by the world. And that's not a bumper sticker. That's a life philosophy that she learned through experience and often through challenge. So before we close out this episode, I'd love to leave you with 2 things to sit with. First, where in your life are you saying no to yourself while you keep saying yes to everyone else? Maybe not big, dramatic no's, but a quiet one, the one where you've slowly made yourself smaller to fit the shape of what is expected of you. And second, is there something that you've been told, or maybe you've told yourself, is the problem? Your ambition, your drive, your refusal to dial it down. Because Ursula's story asks a really uncomfortable question. What if that thing isn't the problem at all? What if it's actually the thing that is going to carry you forward, is going to help you transition through the messy middle to the next thing awaiting you? I'd love to know what came up for you. So jump on and share. You can find me over at bigstuffpod@gmail.com. Or you can find me over on Instagram at I am Danielle Colley, or Big Stuff Podcast. Of course, you can find me over there, or you'll be able to hit reply on this week's email. If you know anyone who needs to hear this episode, please share it with them. And until next week, thank you for tuning in to Big Stuff. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more Big Stuff.